The wind swept across the barren plains of Wyoming, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant memories. As the sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and sorrow, Clara Belle saw him for the first time, the stranger by the river. Clara was just 24, but her heart felt as old as the weathered porch she stood on. A soldier's widow, left to manage a broken farmhouse and a dying dream. Her husband, Eli Bell, had been lost in the Dakota War, and since then, life had become an endless, echoing silence. The crops withered, the animals grew thin, the land itself seemed to mourn with her. In the nearby town, folks would lower their voices when she passed. Poor Clara, they'd murmur, their pity like a heavy shroud. Still wearing black, all alone out there, she tried to ignore their whispers, tried to find strength in the vast, empty landscape that mirrored her own soul. But tonight, something was different. The stranger by the river stood beside a tired horse, his hat tilted low, his face obscured by the shadow of the brim. He looked rough, world-weary, and yet there was a quiet gentleness in the way he filled his canteen, as if even the water could feel the weight of his pain. Clara watched, her heart a still, quiet thing in her chest, as he mounted his horse and began to ride toward her farmhouse. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't fear, nor was it longing. It was something caught in between, a curiosity that stirred the dust of her dormant emotions. He stopped his horse at the foot of her porch and tipped his hat. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to settle in the quiet air. "Name's Rhett Carson. I'm looking for work. Heard you might need a hand around the ranch." Clara hesitated. A woman alone, taking in a stranger. The town would erupt with gossip. It was a risk, a dangerous one, but her fences were collapsing, the barn roof was leaking, and she hadn't managed a proper harvest since Eli's death. She was drowning, and this man, this stranger, felt like a lifeline. "All right," she said, her own voice sounding small and foreign. "You can stay, just till the season ends." Rhett gave a single, respectful nod and led his horse toward the barn. As he walked away, the setting sun burned behind him, a fierce fire following its master into the twilight. That night, sleep refused to come. Clara sat by her window, listening to the wind scrape against the aging wood. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the stranger in her barn. She kept thinking about his eyes. In the brief moment their gazes had met, she'd seen they were blue, as distant and stormy as a winter sea. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much. The days that followed fell into a steady, quiet rhythm. Rhett was a tireless worker. From dawn until dusk, he mended the broken fences, repaired the leaky barn roof, and tended to the land with a silent determination. He never asked about Eli, never pried into her grief. He kept a respectful distance, yet his presence began to fill the suffocating silence of the farm. He brought with him the scent of sawdust and sweat, the sounds of a hammer and saw, the sounds of life returning. And slowly, cautiously, Clara began to feel the ice around her heart begin to thaw. Sometimes, their hands would brush as she passed him a tool, and a jolt, like a tiny spark of lightning, would race up her arm, leaving her breathless. The farm was coming back to life, and in a way, so was she. One dreary afternoon, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon, Rhett was on the barn roof, hammering down the last of the new shingles. Suddenly, the wood slicked with a pre-rain mist, and he slipped. He managed to catch himself, but not before a jagged nail tore a deep gash in his arm. Clara saw it happen from the kitchen window and rushed out, her heart pounding in her throat. She found him grimacing, blood seeping through his sleeve. "I'm fine, Mom," he insisted, trying to pull away as she reached for him. But she wouldn't let him. Her hands trembled as she led him inside and began cleaning the wound. Her touch, surprisingly steady. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, scarred and weathered from a life she couldn't imagine. The air in the small kitchen grew thick with unspoken words. With the storm brewing both outside and between them, the scent of rain and antiseptic filled the silence. "You don't have to be alone out here," Rhett whispered suddenly, his voice raspy with emotion. His blue eyes locked onto hers, filled with a depth of understanding that startled her. She froze, her fingers still on his arm. She looked from his wound to his face, seeing not just a ranch hand, but a man carrying his own heavy burdens. "Neither do you," she replied, her voice barely audible. For a single suspended heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rumbling thunder outside fell silent, and in that quiet moment, something shifted. A connection was forged, delicate and profound. The days that followed blurred into a haze of tentative tenderness and lingering guilt. The widow and the rancher, two solitary souls, found an unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The lonely nights were now filled with the gentle patter of rain on the roof, and the mornings were warmed by the shared aroma of coffee and hay. They spoke more, sharing small stories of their pasts, though Rhett's history remained a carefully guarded fortress. But behind his soft eyes, Clara could still sense something darker, a secret he carried like a hidden scar. Some mornings, she would wake to find him gone, his horse missing from the barn. He would ride out before dawn toward the distant canyons and not return for hours. When he came back, his face would be a mask of grim resolve. Clara's curiosity grew into a quiet unease. Who was Rhett Carson really? Where did he come from? And why had he appeared at her doorstep at the very moment she was losing all hope? The answer came on a quiet, sun-drenched morning, while mending one of Rhett's work coats. Her fingers brushed against something hard and metallic in his pocket. She pulled it out. It was an old tarnished military tag. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the name stamped into the metal. E. Bell, Cavalry Unit, 9th Division. Her heart froze. It was Eli's tag, her husband's. She stumbled backward, the cold metal trembling in her hand. A wave of dizziness washed over her. It had to be a coincidence. It had to be. But Rhett had been so vague, so secretive. Her mind raced, connecting invisible dots, forming a terrifying picture. When he returned from the fields that afternoon, his face streaked with dust and sweat, she was waiting for him on the porch. She held up the tag, her voice low and shaking. "Rhett, where did you get this?" He froze. The easy confidence he always carried vanished, replaced by a flicker of raw panic in his eyes. He saw the tag, and the color drained from his face. "Clara, I can explain." "Explain what?" she demanded, her voice rising with a mix of grief and betrayal. "Explain why my husband's tag was in your coat." Rhett took a hesitant step closer, his own voice breaking. "Because I was there, Clara. I was there the day he died." He looked at her, his eyes welling with a pain that seemed to shatter his tough exterior. "I held him when the bullet hit." Tears streamed down Clara's face. The man she had let into her home, into her heart, the man she was beginning to love, was the last person to see her husband alive. The world spun around her, and before she could find the words to ask the thousand questions screaming in her mind, a loud crack of thunder echoed from the canyons, as if nature itself was reacting to the revelation. Rhett's voice dropped to a haunted whisper, a confession that would shatter her world all over again. "He told me to find you, to protect you." He took a ragged breath, his gaze dark with a terrible secret. "But I never told you the whole truth about who killed him."